In the stillness of night, whispers echo where people no longer walk, where shadows remember what history forgot. These are the stories of the places where the veil thins. This is the truth behind the Haunting podcast. In a quiet corner of coastal Essex lies a house that history refuses to forget. Locals call it the Cage, a small, ordinary-looking cottage that has earned an extraordinary reputation. For centuries, its walls have whispered tales of imprisonment, madness, witchcraft, and restless souls. Every generation seems to uncover new reasons to fear it, and new stories of those who cannot bear to stay inside for long. Today, we step behind its door to trace the story of one of Britain's most haunted homes, the Cage, a house built for confinement, now holding the ghosts of a nation's darkest past. The story of the Cage begins with the story of the village itself, St Osyth, named after a martyred Saxon princess who, legend says, was beheaded for her faith in the 7th century. Locals claimed that where her head fell, a spring of pure water rose. That miracle made this place holy ground and in time a sanctuary for the faithful. But every sanctuary casts a shadow. By the 16th century, England was a nation gripped by suspicion. Fear of heresy had given way to a new terror, witchcraft. Accusation became a weapon, and superstition ruled village life. Essex, with its close-knit communities and rural poverty, was a perfect breeding ground for paranoia. It was here, in this otherwise peaceful village, that an unremarkable stone building was turned into something ominous. The Cage was built in the medieval period as a holding cell, a temporary jail for petty criminals, and later for the women accused of witchcraft. It was never meant to hold anyone for long, but in those days, even a few nights within these walls could mark a person for life. The prisoners slept on straw, the air thick with damp and the stench of fear. Some left, others never did. Between 1582 and 1645, Essex became the epicenter of England's witch trials. Historians estimate that more than 400 people were accused and over 100 executed. In 1582, St Osyth itself became the stage for one of the earliest and most notorious cases. 14 women were accused of witchcraft, said to have cursed cattle, bewitched children, and summoned familiars in animal form. The accusations spiraled into hysteria, fueled by gossip and fear. It was not the work of strangers, but of neighbors turning against each other. And at the center of this frenzy was a woman whose name still echoes through the centuries. Ursula Kemp. Ursula Kemp was a midwife and healer, a woman trusted by her neighbors, until trust turned to doubt. When illnesses spread and misfortune struck, whispers began to grow. She was accused of using her knowledge for dark purposes, blamed for deaths she could not prevent. In 1582, she was arrested and brought to the Cage, awaiting trial. Witnesses, some barely in their teens, testified that she had sent her familiars to harm others. The children's words were enough. She was found guilty of witchcraft and hanged at Chelmsford. The villagers buried her in unconsecrated ground. But her story did not end there. For hundreds of years, people would say her spirit never left the place where she was imprisoned. The Cage remained part of village life long after the witch trials ended. It served as a jail for debtors, a holding cell for drunks, even a private home. But always there were whispers of footsteps on the stairs, cries in the night, and shadows crossing the windows when no one was inside. The villagers said the spirits of the condemned had never been freed. In time, belief hardened into legend. The Cage was seen not merely as a haunted house, but as a scar upon the landscape, a place where the cruelty of the past still breathes. By the late 20th century, the house had changed hands many times. Few stayed long. Tenants spoke of unseen hands touching them in the dark, doors locking by themselves, and children waking to see figures standing by their beds. Each new owner believed they could tame the house's history, but history, it seems, was not ready to rest. And then came one woman who tried to make the Cage her home, and found herself living inside a nightmare. For centuries, The cage stood as a relic of darker times, a monument to injustice and superstition. By the late 20th century, its history had faded into local folklore. Yet for one woman, that folklore was about to become terrifyingly real. In 2004, Vanessa Mitchell bought the cage, hoping to renovate it into a quiet family home. The house looked quaint from the outside, a 2-story cottage with whitewashed walls and small windows that caught the morning sun. Inside, it carried the scent of old timber and centuries of secrets. Vanessa moved in with her son. The first few weeks were uneventful, but soon, odd things began to happen. Small at first, the kind you could explain away. Lights flickered. The front door rattled even when locked. Vanessa would hear footsteps in the hallway when she was alone. She tried to ignore it. Every old house makes noises. Every home holds its quirks. Yet the activity grew bolder. Objects vanished and reappeared. Photographs fell from the walls. One evening, Vanessa stood in the kitchen washing dishes when she felt the air shift. That unmistakable heaviness that tells you are not alone. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a woman standing by the doorway. She wore a long dress, her face pale, her eyes fixed. Vanessa turned fully, but the figure was gone. Only the faint smell of candle smoke lingered. It was the first full apparition seen in the cage in modern times. Vanessa began to document everything. She kept a diary, noting every sound, every object moved, every cold spot. She contacted local historians, trying to understand who the woman could be. Many believed it was Ursula Kemp, the same witch imprisoned here centuries earlier. Others thought it was the spirit of another prisoner, a victim of the witch trials who never left. Whatever the truth, Vanessa's peace was gone. Over the next 3 years, the disturbances grew relentless. Visitors would arrive cheerful and leave unsettled. Some refused to step inside again. Vanessa reported voices whispering her name, the sound of chains dragging across the floor, and sudden, violent temperature drops. One evening, while sitting on the sofa, she felt invisible hands grab her shoulders and pull her backward. Her son began to sleep downstairs, too afraid of the upstairs rooms. Vanessa sought help from clergy and paranormal researchers. She cleansed, prayed, and even tried moving furniture to disrupt what investigators call spiritual lines. Nothing worked. The cage had claimed yet another resident. Eventually, Vanessa could take no more. She moved out, leaving most of her belongings behind. But even after she left, she said the haunting followed her in dreams. As word spread, the cage attracted attention from across Britain's paranormal community. Investigators, journalists, and television crews descended on the small Essex village, determined to document its mysteries. One of the earliest professional teams to spend a full night there reported electrical failures and drained batteries, classic indicators of alleged paranormal energy. In their footage, shadowy figures appeared to move across the staircase, only to vanish on playback. EVP sessions recorded voices responding to questions. When one investigator asked, "Who are you?" a woman's whisper seemed to reply, "Ursula." Cameras captured doors slamming, objects falling, and sudden bursts of cold mist forming mid-room. Some experiences could be explained: drafts, old wiring, suggestion. Others defied easy answers. Skeptics argued that human imagination, amplified by fear, could create false perceptions. Yet those who spent time inside insisted something unseen was actively reacting to them. One researcher described hearing a woman sobbing in the small upstairs room, the same cell where accused witches once awaited trial. When he opened the door, the room was empty, but the sobbing continued right behind him. Through the 2010s, the cage became a fixture on paranormal programs and YouTube investigations. Hundreds of hours of footage exist: night vision clips, thermal images, EVPs, even physical attacks on camera. During one documented session, a visiting medium claimed she felt hands around her throat. The camera caught her gasping for air before the team rushed her outside. Moments later, Red marks appeared on her neck. Another team filmed what appeared to be a faint human shape passing across a doorway, despite no one being in that part of the house. Skeptics dismissed it as reflection. Believers called it proof. In every case, one thing was certain. The energy inside the cage affected everyone differently. Some felt sadness, others anger, others a pressure so heavy it brought them to tears. While investigators searched for ghosts, villagers faced a different question. What does it mean to live beside a place that frightens the nation? Many locals supported Vanessa and later owners, saying the cage had always felt heavy, as though grief hung in the air. Others preferred not to speak about it at all, fearing that attention only awakened what should be left alone. Some villagers reported seeing faces in the upstairs windows at night when the building was empty. Others heard knocks echoing across the high street long after midnight. Whether those experiences were imagination or something far older, the effect on the community was undeniable. St Osyth became a point of pilgrimage for ghost hunters, historians, and the curious, a place where history and haunting intertwined. Several clergy members were asked to bless the house. One Anglican priest performed a full house cleansing, reading prayers in each room. For a few days, the atmosphere seemed lighter. Then, late one night, the activity returned with force. Doors slammed in sequence, one after another, as though someone walked through the house unseen. The priest later described a feeling of deep sorrow pressing on his chest. Not evil, but mourning. It raised a question few dared to answer. Were the spirits of the cage seeking release, or were they trapped in perpetual punishment? For believers, this was evidence of residual energy, emotion imprinted on stone. For skeptics, it was proof of suggestion and the human mind's ability to create patterns in chaos. But even the skeptics who entered the cage agreed on one thing. It is a place where emotion is palpable. You can feel its history pressing in. By the mid-2000s, the cage had evolved from a private home into something of a living museum, a location where history, folklore, and the supernatural meet. Visitors reported nausea, sudden dizziness, and even fainting. Equipment malfunctioned. Experienced investigators refused to return. Tour guides described moments when everyone in a group simultaneously heard a loud sigh coming from upstairs. Some experiences defy measurement. One local journalist who spent the night there wrote that the atmosphere felt alive, as if the house was breathing with us. Even now, new reports surface, voices captured on mobile phones, sudden battery drains, visitors sensing that someone stands just behind them. Technology has advanced, but the mystery remains. The cage endures, not as a ruin of the past, but as an active presence in the present. Some believe the energy here is the sum of all who suffered within these walls. Prisoners, accused witches, desperate souls who begged for justice that never came. Others think the building has become a conduit, drawing in energy from the countless visitors who come expecting fear. Perhaps both are true. For more than 600 years, this small house has witnessed humanity at its most fragile. It has seen faith twisted into fear, and fear reborn as legend. But behind the ghost stories lies a deeper truth, a question that has haunted the cage since its beginning. Is it the dead who cannot move on, or the living who cannot let go? Every haunting invites a question of faith. The cage is no exception. For centuries, faith was both weapon and refuge here. Those accused of witchcraft were judged by men who believed they were serving God. The same faith now inspires priests and investigators who hope to drive away what lingers. Inside the cage, belief and fear collide. To some, the activity is demonic, a manifestation of evil bound to the site by centuries of suffering. To others, it is the echo of injustice, spirits replaying the trauma of their final days. One deliverance minister who visited the property described the air as thick with lamentation. He felt there was more than one presence, a restless woman and something darker that seemed to watch from the corners. He read prayers in Latin and sprinkled holy water across the threshold. For a moment, the atmosphere lifted, but as the group prepared to leave, A crucifix fell from the wall behind them. Coincidence, perhaps, or a warning. Experts who study such cases often distinguish between haunting and oppression. A haunting, they say, is the residue of emotion. Oppression implies an active intelligence. The cage shows signs of both. A demonologist studying the case noted patterns of provocation, events that seem to escalate in response to challenge. He suggested that the building acts like a wound, continually reopened by human attention. According to him, locations linked to intense injustice, such as witch trials, can become spiritual conduits. Suffering, ritual, and fear merge into a single vibration that endures. Whether one calls it energy, consciousness, or the residue of sin, its presence at the cage feels undeniable. Not all explanations require the supernatural. Psychology provides its own insight into what happens when people enter places heavy with expectation. The mind, wired for survival, heightens its awareness in darkness. A creak becomes a whisper. A shadow becomes a shape. Memory and imagination conspire to fill the silence. Parapsychologists suggest that hauntings may be the result of place memory, combined with human suggestion. When many people believe a site is haunted, they unconsciously interpret ordinary stimuli as evidence. Yet even researchers who hold this view admit that the cage produces responses stronger than most. Visitors display measurable stress reactions, increased heart rate, temperature change, tremors. Fear itself becomes part of the phenomenon. So, is the haunting in the house or in us? What makes the cage unique is the way its history and haunting intertwine. The witch trials of Essex were driven by fear, and that same fear seems to echo still. Every accusation, every confession forced under duress, every life taken, those emotions saturate the stone. It is as if the building remembers. When modern visitors step inside, they are not only walking through a haunted house, they are stepping into the unresolved conscience of a nation that once executed its own neighbors for imagined crimes. Standing inside the cage today, one feels suspended between heaven and earth. The weight of sorrow presses from the past, yet a quiet beauty remains, a strange peace that follows the fear. Some believe that acknowledging such places brings healing. Others think it risks inviting darkness closer. Both may be right. Vanessa once said she hoped the souls within would find peace. Perhaps by telling their story, she has given them a voice and a chance to be remembered for more than the accusations that condemned them. The cage endures as more than a haunted house. It is a reminder of what fear can do when given power. Its ghosts, real or imagined, represent those silenced by superstition. Each creak of its floorboards recalls a question humanity still struggles to answer. Why do we fear what we do not understand? Perhaps the true haunting of the cage lies not in the spirits of the dead, but in the memories we choose to keep alive. If you ever visit St Osyth, you may walk past a small house on the high street without giving it a second glance. But within those walls, the past still whispers. And somewhere, in the quiet between heartbeats, the cage is still watching. Thanks for joining us on the Truth Behind the Haunting podcast. If you enjoyed our journey into the supernatural, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow ghost seekers. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and stay aware of what moves in the shadows.